Hello and welcome to the Oxford Clay Pottery Podcast. I'm Catherine Tomlinson and I founded Oxford Clay, an eco-conscious pottery company. So on this podcast, we're going to be talking about all things pottery related, often with an eco-conscious twist, and I can't wait to share it with you. Let's go. Hi everyone, and welcome back to the Oxford Clay Pottery Podcast. I'm Catherine, and today we're going to be talking about a damp box. Intriguing. So, so first of all, what on earth is a damp box? Why should we use it? And what's going on? So basically, when I used to go to adult evening classes to do pottery, they used to have these things called damp cupboards, and what they were these kind of metal cupboards that you could store your pottery in basically until the next week, because the adult evening class was like from week to week basically. So it was like you made something, you got as far as you could in like, you know, your 3 hour time, whatever, and then you would wrap it up in plastic. They had loads and loads of like plastic bags and stuff, and then you'd put it in this damp cupboard. And the idea was that it was like going to keep your work damp until the next time you could work on it, which was like the next week. So, you know, if you're doing your own pottery at home, this is such a good thing to be able to do, to basically, if you don't finish something, you know, quite often it takes a long time to make a pot, you know, especially if you're sort of sculpting or something. So you want to keep your work wet. Well, just stop it from drying out in between when you can work on it. So a really good method I found for this is a damp box. So, I mean, I don't have enough space to keep like a whole damp cupboard, you know, like they have in like, you know, commercial pottery studios, you know, adult education settings. So I wondered whether I could do the same effect, but just like on a much smaller scale, using a box. And it turns out a box is really, really good. So basically, I use one of those plastic storage boxes, you know, with a lid, and you can get them from like hardware stores, or, you know, like the supermarket even. There's a famous company called the Really Useful Box, and they're just like, you know, clear plastic boxes with a lid that you can even kind of lock and stuff. Some of them even, you know, you can have like kind of air vent that you can close. So I found these to be like really, really good for keeping your work wet, basically, from, you know, working on it once to then the next time you can work on it. So another really good thing about a damp box is that when I went to adult evening classes, we used to have to wrap our work up in plastic to stop it from drying out, because the damp cupboards were basically just like a metal cupboard. So they quite often let like air through to your work, and so you really did have to wrap it up. And if any, you know, in a plastic bag, and if any kind of part of it was exposed, you'd often have that part like completely dry, and then the rest of it was like wet, completely wet, which meant that, you know, you couldn't turn a pot if you'd you know, made it on the wheel. So it's like really frustrating. And quite often, if you wrapped it up completely in plastic, like it would be too wet from week to week. So what I found with a damp box, just like, you know, a plastic box with a lid, is that it doesn't keep your work like too wet. It's much easier to kind of dry work out slowly in a damp box. So another really good thing is that it doesn't like squash your work. So when I wrapped it up in plastic in the adult evening classes, quite often it would like, you know, drag on the pot and bend it out of shape. Or it would like, you know, leave a plastic bag type surface, you know, sort of like pattern on my pot and stuff, which is really frustrating, because you just basically don't want anything to touch your pot as soon as, you know, after you've made it, until it's like at the leather hard stage, and then it can like, you know, take being touched much, much better. So that's the beauty of a damp box, is basically like take the lid off, put your work inside, put the lid on, nobody's touching it, it's safe in there, until you can work on it next. Okay, so another really good thing about a damp box is that it's really good for drying your work evenly. And drying your work evenly is a really important thing in pottery, because if work dries unevenly, like say you've made a mug and the handle is you've put the handle on afterwards, the handle might be a lot thinner than your pot, than your mug. And in which case it will dry out faster than the mug body, and that's quite often why handles can like crack off the main part of your mug, because they're drying at different speeds. And so the really good thing about a damp box is you can put like finished work in there as well, and it will mean that it dries much more evenly. So the part that was like drying too quickly stopped drying so quickly, the part that wasn't drying quickly enough kind of also stops drying so quickly, so they're kind of just like evened out, and they basically absorb clay. The dry bit will absorb water from the atmosphere from the other bit, so it's like it evens out the dryness of your pot, and it makes your pots like less prone to cracking. So it might even be if that's happening to you loads, and your handles are always cracking off, you could try just once you've made them, putting them in a damp box and just drying them like super slowly, and that might help with the whole like handle cracking off problem. So to dry it quite slowly, you could just take the lid off for a few hours, put the lid back on again overnight or something, do the same thing, take the lid off, until you're confident that they're both kind of like dry enough to be, and they've dried at the same rate, basically. So that's another reason that a damp box is really, really good. Yeah, okay, so another reason, the final reason for that damp boxes are really good is that they are much smaller than, say, like a damp cupboard. So I was reading a book recently, a pottery book, and it was saying that you can use old fridges for a damp cupboard, and it was saying that they're really good, they stop your work from drying out. And I was thinking, yeah, that is a fantastic idea, to keep your work damp in a fridge. But also an old fridge that doesn't work, by the way. An old fridge, but also like takes up quite a lot of space, like a massive old fridge. Although it probably does a really good job of stopping your work from drying out. So the really good thing about using a kind of plastic storage box as a damp box is that they're much smaller. And so if you're just making work at your kitchen table, you're making work from air dried clay, and you keep on, you want to work on it, and then you can just keep on putting it back in the box, and the box is quite small. You can get very small boxes, you can get slightly bigger ones for like storing stuff under your bed and stuff like that. Those kind of like under bed storage boxes, big ones, or you can get like smaller ones, and yeah, so you can choose how big you want your damp box depending on your work. So that's another really, really good reason. It like saves space. You don't have to have like a massive fridge. You don't again have to have any like specialist equipment. These are all really easily available from like any shop, supermarkets, hardware shops, and they're so useful in pottery. Okay, so those are some 3 really good reasons to use a damp box. So, we looked at plastic storage boxes with a lid and how they are really fantastic in pottery for keeping your work from drying out between when you're working on it. And we looked at the fact that they don't squash your work like a plastic bag does. Nobody wants that. We talked about how they're very easily available. They're cheap. We talked about how you don't have to have like this huge damp cupboard in your house. You can just use a kind of quite a small like Tupperware box, or you can use a small storage box, or you can use a bigger one depending on how big your work is. And we talked about also how they can stop your work from cracking, because they can even out the dryness of your work whilst it's resting, whilst it's in the damp box. Yeah, so that's definitely my top tip. I use a damp box for all my work. I use it like on a daily basis. I'd be totally lost without my, storage box and I just find them so useful. I use them every day. So yeah, I hope this episode's been useful for you, and I can't wait to see you next time. Happy potting! So, if you liked that and you're interested in learning more about pottery, eco conscious pottery, tools and techniques for potters, there's so much for you on the Oxford Clay website. There's blogs, ebooks, e courses, video courses, and I can't wait to see you there. So, the website is www.oxfordclay.co.uk.